The last portion that I want to talk about from this anatomy of a web page PDF is the footer. The footer is what you can find at the bottom of a website. This portion will usually or sometimes contain prominent sections of the website, useful links to particular sections, contact information, copyright line, privacy policy, and so on. Just like the header portion, it is consistent throughout the website. Looking at UCM's website, here's our footer, this bottom portion, and it has links to useful pages. There's contact information. And while it doesn't necessarily have a copyright line, it does have this section that says page last modified November 20th, 2014, which doesn't seem accurate. But that's beside the point. It is consistent no matter what page I'm on, just like the header section. When I'm on the About page, it has the same look as it did in the home page. Academics looks the same. Costs looks the same, and so on. That completes the anatomy of a web page PDF portion of what I want to talk about. At this point, now that you know a little bit about the semantic markup tags that we will be using to go along with various parts of a web page, and now that you know about the anatomy of a web page, we're ready to start coding. For this lab 2, we will be recycling what we did for lab 1B. Since we've already created all that code, we will just continue on with that. At this point, depending on your file management system, what I would recommend you do is take a copy of your lab 1B folder, which contains the HTML and JPEG. Take a copy of that and paste them into a new folder. In this case, I'm going to start a new folder called lab2, lab-2, and I will copy that HTML file. Regardless of whether you're on a PC or a Mac, it'll be the same thing. It is just a matter of right-clicking and choosing copy, and then going to the folder where you want to paste that copy into. In this case, my lab2 folder. Now you'll notice that I only copied the HTML file. We don't need the JPEG file. We will not be using it for lab 2. In making this copy, you are keeping the original intact so that you can review it later if you want to. Now this is a different lab, so go ahead and rename that copy to your last name dash lab dash 2.html. Before you move on or continue with the rest of the video, I would like to remind you again to please go ahead and make edits to your code, to your files, as recommended by me or your classmates. If you're ready to continue, then go ahead and open this HTML file using your plain text editor. For me, I will be using Adobe Dreamweaver. Once you have that open, select the H1 line all the way to the paragraph, the closing P tag right before hyperlinks. After you select all that, go ahead and delete it and save that. then open a preview of that. This is what your page should look like. It should have a hyperlinks section, line breaks, unordered lists, ordered lists, and the final note. Since our web page does not have a header section, we'll start with that. The header section is a container for introductory information. If you recall from the Anatomy of a Web Page PDF, this introductory information can include a logo, navigation to major sections of the website, contact information, social media, and photos. Let's start with the semantic markup tag. Going back to your HTML, add your opening header, closing header tag, and we'll put a paragraph inside that. As I'm using white space, you can easily tell that this paragraph is inside my header in the way that I indented it within the header container. And I call it container because it contains this P element, paragraph element. In this paragraph, let's say for your notes, this is a container for introduction information. It usually includes a nav section. This nav section is used for navigational elements, and it's usually placed in the header section. I'll add my opening nav tag and a closing nav tag so I don't forget. And you can tell that it is contained within the header container because it is nested inside that. Again, this is a great way to use white space so that you can easily see at a glance how different elements relate to each other. Speaking of elements, here's some review from Module 1. Here's this paragraph element as an example. If you recall, a paragraph or an element has an opening tag. In this case, that would be the opening paragraph tag. It has a closing tag, which differs from the opening tag with this forward slash here, and then in between the opening and closing tags would be the content, and all three together make up an element. Nav tags, with their navigational elements, it usually contains an unordered list. That is how navigational links are usually implemented. Last time, our last lab, we created an unordered list. And here's the syntax for that. You have an opening and closing UL tag, and then for each list item or line item, we have separate LI tags.